Rolling in 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right, thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate your time and your attendance today. We will be talking about the important topics of photography today. And what I'll get started with is that basically photography is everywhere. We're surrounded by it every day. And 4 things that you do need to know about photography if you want to get started and get a little more involved. The first thing we need to know is DSLR. And the second thing would be lenses, lighting, and digital editing is what we'll be talking about. So let's get started with the DSLR. First of all, what does DSLR stand for? DSLR stands for digital single lens reflex. So basically there is a mirror inside the camera. The image comes into the lens, basically from here. It projects into the body, and then you can see it through the viewfinder. So the body consists, the camera consists of 3 things: the body, the lens, and the LCD screen. Those are 3 important things that you need to know about that. Now there are different brands that are with the cameras, such as Canon, Nikon, Sony, and as you can see, there are different sizes and models and a lot of different things that these cameras have. The price range on these are usually between $5,000 and $50,000. When you buy a camera, you want to pay attention to the megapixels. The smaller amount of megapixels in the camera, the smaller the actual picture will be. The larger it is, the more you can print out, for instance, and more than likely, the more expensive the camera will be as well. You want to know what the purpose of the use is. Yeah. You want to know if you'll be using it for sports, for travel, for everyday things, or if you're thinking about actually getting into a little more professional photography. If you're getting into professional photography, you probably want to buy a camera that is upgradable. If you're traveling, you probably want to buy a small camera that's not so heavy. Now, the next thing I'll be talking about is the exposure triangle, which is the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture. I'll be beginning with the ISO. The camera is very similar to the human eye. The back of the eye is the retina, and that's how ISO is. ISO is basically the sensitivity of the light that comes into the camera. And what happens is the higher the number of ISO is, the more grainier the picture will be. For instance here, this at the bottom is a picture that was taken at a very high ISO, and this is a picture that was taken at a very low ISO. The shutter speed is basically the speed of how fast or how slow the shutter opens, and it's also considered exposure, how much light comes into the shutter. It's measured usually in 1/1000th of a second, and sometimes the shutter can be open for hours. For instance, this is a picture that was taken at high speed, probably 1/1000th of a second, if not faster. This one as well. This is just a moment, a glimpse of how quick the water was coming out of that glass. It just happened for a split second. And here's another example. This guy was only in the sky for a split second. Here's an example of a long shutter speed. What happened is that these are all stars, and they traveled from one spot to another, and in the meantime, the exposure was open, the shutter speed was open the entire time. And here's another example. Here the shutter speed must have been open, or the shutter must have been open for about 20 seconds. Now, the aperture. The aperture is basically how wide or closed the shutter is. So it's measured basically in f-stops. The f-stops are measured from 1.4 to 22. And the more light that comes in, the larger the aperture will be. Okay. So here's an example of low f-stop, where the back of the picture, the background is very blurry, and the front is really in focus. So the depth of field is very obvious. And the next picture here, we have probably 100 feet of a picture, but there's no blurriness in it. So this must have been taken at an f-stop of, say, f22 perhaps. Now, the aperture and the cameras always go hand in hand. There are a lot of lenses that are available, lenses ranging anywhere between $50 and $15,000. The lenses are measured in a focal length. And so some lenses you can see how close you're standing to an actual image or object. That's where you want to use the lens. Okay, so when you're buying a lens, you can buy a lens kit. A lens kit, for instance, on this camera is used for multiple purpose. Such like as this one. This is an 18 to 200. I can use it anywhere from any distance. I can travel and see into the distance, but I can also take a picture from close up. Now then there's sports photography. Usually sports photographers and wildlife photographers use telephoto lenses. As you can see, this guy is standing from a far distance, and he's probably taking a picture of something that's really far away, but he can't get into the field, but he's really close up and he can see a really good image with that lens. Now the next lens that we have is a wide angle lens. It's usually used for landscape or journalistic photography. And as you can see here, we have a large range on this picture. So you couldn't get that with a telephoto lens, because if you did, you would probably zoom in just to one spot. And same thing here, you have a long range of image, which you couldn't get with a telephoto. The next thing we'll be talking about is the macro lens. The macro lens is good for super close-up pictures, things that the human eye normally can't pay attention to or see. For instance, this right here. Here you can see the single fibers very close, and you wouldn't be able to see that without just looking at it without maybe a loupe or something. Okay, and here's another example. Who can really get that close to an animal to see the details like that? Okay, the next thing we'll be talking about is sunlight. Sunlight is an important factor when it comes to taking pictures. A lot of people ask me, what do I have to do to get a good picture, and especially if they're outside. And if you're outside, you want to make sure that you can find that lighting in a diffused setting. For instance, in clouds, like for instance here, this baby here doesn't have any direct sunlight on him, and there's light probably bouncing off from somewhere, and he's in a shadow. You can get diffused light in shade, or in a cloudy day, or you can even use a diffuser. This is often used to diffuse light if you actually have somebody to hold it up for you, which can be difficult sometimes. You probably need a photographer's assistant, but often this right here will diffuse the light and will make the shadows less harsh. Okay, now there's a way to also intensify the quality of the lighting, not just by diffusing, but also by filling the shadows. You can do that by either reflecting the light that's coming off from a certain distance, like this for instance. So if the light's coming from this area, but there's a shadow over here, I can reflect it onto me or onto your image. You can also use a flash. A flash is also used, so it's in sync with the camera, and then you just hit the flash, and at the same time, you can go ahead and just lighten up.